Anthony Edwards was asked about his and the Minnesota Timberwolves' chances in the Western Conference with the Oklahoma City Thunder, the San Antonio Spurs, and he did not hesitate to say that he believes that Minnesota can beat those teams. And while Minnesota was in the Western Conference just a season and a half ago, the question now becomes about, have the Minnesota Timberwolves become the forgotten contender in the Western Conference with the young teams on the rise, or has their window already passed them by? We're going to talk about all that plus more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of the Full Court Podcast. My name is Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow us at the Full Court YT on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, I want to start with this quote from Anthony Edwards, where he was asked about the Minnesota Timberwolves' chance in the Western Conference. He said this: "Against those two teams, I think we're going to beat them," which he should have. He said, "It would mean a lot to win a championship, but right now, I don't think we're thinking about winning a championship. It's step by step. We got LaMelo Ball, a new player, and a bunch of new pieces. So we're trying to build it together, and I think we're going to gel it all together." So the Timberwolves have been a tough team in the Western Conference. And over the last couple of years, I think most people, if they can admit it, anytime they have been counted out, they have almost responded in an amazing way. You look at them going to the Western Conference Finals last year, right? Like, this is a team that's been to the Western Conference Finals multiple times. They've just not gotten over that hump. So the question then becomes about, has that hill now gotten even bigger for them in a way that they can't pass? And now they made a change to the roster. Getting LaMelo Ball was a change. And for what it's worth, their GM also said they're not done adding because they do have a lack of front court depth right now. Is Ant right to be confident in this team? And I'll say this. Let's talk about both sides of this. Yes, he's a franchise player. You want your franchise player to be confident. Now, Anthony Edwards has been somebody that's always admitted as well. He's never separated himself from some of the criticism that he has about his team's play, and some of the shortcomings. He's never been afraid to remove himself or to include himself in that criticism, right? Minnesota is a playoff-tested team. They've been through those playoff battles, right? They've seen OKC. They've seen San Antonio up close, right? And he has earned the right to be confident in his team because Anthony Edwards is one of those players that has gotten better every single year. He has turned so many of the pre-draft kind of criticisms and critiques about him into strengths. Adding LaMelo Ball gives them another real offensive player and another player that can elevate the team potentially. Now, I do think Ant adds pressure to his team. That's kind of what superstars do with their confidence, right? The Spurs, they eliminated Minnesota last season. OKC is an absolute loaded team that may have gotten even stronger in the Western Conference despite them losing players like Wiggins and Lou Dort. You know, they've possibly gotten stronger and put players in a situation to do even more, right? And there are some major roster questions when it comes to Minnesota. So now the question becomes about, are they the forgotten contender in the Western Conference? Can they still contend in the West? I'll say yes, they're being forgotten to a degree. We'll talk about the contender part of it. Anthony Edwards is a superstar in this league. That is the level of player that he is. LaMelo Ball gives them a secondary creator and another player that can absolutely fill it up. He's going to have to show that he can continue to play winning basketball as well, but he's a player that absolutely is there. You look at Jaden McDaniels and Josh Green. They give those players defensive wings that are going to be able to kind of switch and guard multiple positions. Rudy Gobert is still an anchor of the defense despite his decline in some areas offensively. He's still that. This is a team that has those playoff scars, and we've talked about how those battles matter in getting you tougher for those matchups and for the ride that comes in the playoffs. But at the same time, the questions are real about this team and its ability to be a contender. LaMelo has health concerns. He's not always able to stay healthy, and he doesn't always make the smartest plays always. Naz Reid, Julius Randle being gone, that front court depth is legitimate there. And so with the hit that the front court depth took, that's now the weak spot for this team. While sometimes they needed a secondary creator, they needed those things. Like, they have LaMelo Ball. They have Anthony Edwards. They have McDaniels that we talked about. They have Rudy Gobert. They have Ayo Dosunmu. Do not overlook Ayo Dosunmu and the importance that he's going to have in this team as well. But you can kind of hope that a Rocco Zikarsky, a Juan Berenger, right, Jaden McDaniels take a significant step forward. You are still looking at players that you still have hope that you don't know for sure on how they're going to. The West is bigger than ever. ever. It's younger than ever. It's deeper than ever as well. And so while Minnesota right now is dangerous on paper, they're going to have to show that it's still a reality, that they can still got that. They are forgotten because the talent is obvious for sure, but the questions that they have on the roster is very, very loud, right? So then you look at those questions. LaMelo Ball is fit with Anthony Edwards, right? Is this going to end up being one of those perfect matches that ends up working out, or is it going to be a risky experiment that doesn't, right? Does LaMelo and Ant unlock anything together and adds a different layer to their game, right? Of course, now LaMelo he's a playmaker, and the Minnesota Timberwolves have lacked a playmaker at that point guard position, and Anthony Edwards has had to take on a lot of that workload. Now, how does that free Anthony Edwards up to be more of a scoring threat, or vice versa, right? You don't have to look at Ant to create every advantage for this Minnesota Timberwolves team anymore like you have in the past. LaMelo Ball is going to be able to push the pace. He's going to be able to throw those hit-ahead passes. He's going to be able to manipulate defenses. That's what LaMelo can do when he's playing at his most optimal, and it allows Anthony Edwards to attack more often in movement and to hunt out advantageous situations for him that he hasn't always been able to do because he hadn't had a player with the gravity that LaMelo Ball can create, right? So this makes the Minnesota Timberwolves offense a lot less predictable, which is good when you look at it, especially when you talk about playoff and go there. But there's just no doubt that this is a risky experiment. LaMelo needs freedom. He needs catch his rhythm. Ant is still an alpha, absolutely, right? And so the late game hierarchy in that is going to be a question there. Now, I would say that LaMelo kind of learned that with Knippel last year and Brandon Miller both making steps up. LaMelo's shot selection also and turnovers can create problems that maybe you're going to use Anthony Edwards to kind of overcome that there. And so the fit is going to depend a lot on chemistry and, of course, health with LaMelo Ball. Can he stay healthy enough for them to fit that? But then there's also an underrated fit on this roster, and that's LaMelo Ball and Rudy Gobert. I think that this is going to be there. LaMelo can make Rudy Gobert more useful offensively, even with that decline that I talked about Rudy Gobert has been on for the last couple of years. With LaMelo and the creative passer that he is, Gobert is going to be able to benefit off being that lob threat and dive man that LaMelo Ball can absolutely get him the ball in. Getting easier buckets in transition is how you can make Rudy Gobert a much more offensive threat than what he's been the last couple of years, and then it looked like the trends were going with him, right? And so now that you look at LaMelo Ball and how he can manufacture touches without forcing offense to Rudy Gobert, that's going to be there. So now if you can make Rudy Gobert be a less non-factor when teams load up on Anthony Edwards between LaMelo and Rudy Gobert, that's going to make and help them take that next step as a team that we're talking about here, right? But the fact is that there still are limits to that. Rudy Gobert is still a very limited offensive player, right? And playoff defenses, they're designed to shrink the floor. So LaMelo Ball's passing, it only helps if the spacing is clean. So then you're going to have to look at that and how do you create that spacing? Against elite teams, Rudy Gobert is still going to have to finish through traffic and those type of things. And that's where he's had a little bit of trouble at, right? So Wolves are still going to need shooting around those actions, which I would assume can help with. He's grown as a three-point shooter every year of his career. Of course, Anthony Edwards has grown as a three-point shooter. And so when you look at it, LaMelo can give Rudy Gobert 4 to 6 easy points a night. Easy, just as easy points a night, right? And so that does change the playoff math for the Minnesota Timberwolves a little bit and how you get there. But the main problem is still going to be the front court depth. Naz Reid was a huge loss for this team. Julius Randle gave them physicality. He gave them scoring. He gave them rebounding. He gave them another on-ball creator, which LaMelo can replace the on-ball creation part, right? And so when you look at the West and how it's loaded with size, you have Wemby, you have Chet, you have Jokic, you have Anthony, you have Walker Kessler now in the front court there in the West also. Like, you have so many really good front courts in the Western Conference. As you look at those teams now, you're saying, hey, I don't know if you have enough depth. Even if Rudy Gobert can be that offensive weapon, I don't know if you have enough depth to get you where you need to go. And that goes back to the Wolves GM talking about that they're not done adding to this team, because you look around, they're going to have to add something to this team, right? And there are players out there that can help with that. Like, you look at some of the players that are on teams like the Clippers roster who could look to make a move. The Sacramento Kings have, players that you could look to make a move in that. So you're going to look at those teams and see what and where you can get some of that help with in those times, because there are going to be some teams that have some front court depth that they're willing to move off of in some point of the season. And if I'm the Wolves, I'm keeping my ear on the phone to get that, right? But I still think that this trade was worth it because of what it gave them, because of the offensive upside that it gave them, because they needed a true point guard, because of all those type of things there. And so now you have to ask your question specifically, right? When you look at the OKC Thunder, it's about the pressure that the OKC Thunder is going to put on ball handlers. Ant can match the star power of any team. LaMelo gives them another creator, right? Jaden McDaniels hopefully is going to be able to make a step and take on the tough defensive positioning, and Rudy Gobert protecting the rim. But then when you look at the OKC Thunder, they force turnovers. They play fast, and they put pressure on everything, on every single position. And when you look at LaMelo Ball's risk-taking, how can that play into the strengths that the OKC Thunder have? That's a question. With OKC having multiple creators, multiple defenders, it could be a tough matchup for them when you look at it. So when you look at the Wolves' biggest question against OKC, it comes down to, can Ant and LaMelo take care of the ball and limit OKC's transition opportunities? If you can do that, you can benefit the team. Then you look at the Wolves versus the Spurs, right? This is, how do you solve the Wemby problem? Like, of course, LaMelo can get creative with passing angles. You can get that. Ant can attack before the defense has a chance to set in. That's the best way to do it. And Rudy Gobert gives them size at the rim, even though Wemby's a monster to deal with. But you look at how Wemby changes everything for that team. The size that they have, even what they added in the draft and stuff like that. You already eliminated the Minnesota Timberwolves, or you're the Spurs, so you have some confidence there. The question for the Minnesota Timberwolves against the Spurs comes down to this. Can Minnesota create enough spacing and quick decisions to keep Wemby from controlling the paint completely? And that's going to be the thing there. But one of the biggest swing things outside of course, the front court depth is LaMelo Ball's health. That is going to be one of the biggest swing things that happens in this season for the Minnesota Timberwolves, is that, can LaMelo be available when they need him the most? And that's it. If he plays 65 plus games, Minnesota can build the chemistry. They can figure out what they need to. You gave up real assets to get LaMelo Ball. You need him to have one of his healthiest seasons, period, right? You need him available in the playoffs, and not just for highlights. You need him available for those tough matchups and those games. And I do think this, like, how much can you survive without? In the regular season, they can get wins with LaMelo Ball maybe not being 100% healthy or missing some games. You can do that. But when you talk about the playoffs, you're going to need LaMelo Ball to be completely healthy, locked in, ready to go for the playoffs, because if not, those matchups that we talked about, they get so much more difficult unless another move comes. They got some things that can help them save it off, but you are going to need LaMelo Ball to be healthy for you to get the best out of those matchups. So, final verdict. Are the Wolves a forgotten contender or just a flawed threat in it? And I think when you look at it, you have a superstar in Ant, and his ability to be the best player on the floor in any series is still there, right? LaMelo raises their offensive ceiling. Gobert is still going to be an elite defensive anchor, at least for another year, right? And you have that playoff experience as a team. If healthy, I still give the Minnesota Timberwolves a chance to beat anyone, depending on how they play and if they're locked in. But at the same time, the flawed threat part of it is real. The front court depth is thinner than ever for this team in a West that has more size than ever. LaMelo health is a huge question in regards to that, and the West is just brutal. So when you look at it, it depends on how they handle that late game hierarchy. It depends on how well the LaMelo and Anthony Edwards, chemistry ends up being for real. And those are things that we're just going to have to see how it happens. But let me know what you think down below. Have the Minnesota Timberwolves become a forgotten contender in the Western Conference? Or are they a team that's going to be really good, but they no longer are looked at as that high-level threat that they were before, if you even ever looked at them? Because some people are going to probably say they never really looked at the Minnesota Timberwolves as that threat. This is going to be a fun team to watch in the Western Conference. And I think the West, while the Eastern Conference is taking some hits, stuff like that, the West is going to be really interesting. The Lakers are going to be another team. We're going to do a profile on them sooner rather than later. The Denver Nuggets are always going to be there. The Houston Rockets getting Fred VanVleet back as well. What kind of step do the Phoenix Suns take? Of course, you're going to have your teams that take steps back, like the Clippers, the Golden State Warriors, those type of teams. So we'll see. But let me know what you guys think about the Timberwolves' chances in the Western Conference. Make sure you sound off down below on everything that we cover here on the show. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You can follow us at The Full Court YT on every social media platform. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBACentralShow@gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and or voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything basketball and NBA related. And I'll catch you guys the next time I feel like making an episode. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
Been a presentation of the Breaks Media.